one. Let's see, 80. No, that looks great. So welcome back. It's really great to see lots of new people, lots of old friends. Some of the things I might be, Katie's telling me not to do this all the time, so I'll try not to. Some of the things I mentioned, I may have mentioned earlier. So if you have any questions at the end about things that came up that didn't make sense, let me know. But we're going to start with the original manuscript of My Side of the Mountain. I got copies of this from the Curlin collection of the University of Minnesota. They're a group, it's a library within the University of Minnesota library that collects children's books, authors' drafts of their books as they work on them. And it's really fascinating. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, Curlin collection, you can go online and explore their material online. It's in Minnesota. Nice trip. So this is the first page of the manuscript. Now, my mother wrote this in 3 weeks, but as many of you probably know who have published books or written things before, you can write something all the way through, but you always have changes. And you can see in some of these pages that I'm going to show you kind of how her thinking goes. At first, she began with, first we have the chapter titles. And here you can see her kind of running through different options for the chapter titles. It's the notes of Samuel Trilby, Esquire, to Samuel Trilby Samuel Trilby have run away, in which I hole up in a snowstorm. And then the one that was typed, All Alone in the Wilds. And then Samuel R. Gribley, Mountain Dweller. And so I think here, she wasn't even sure of Sam Gribley's name. And as I was thinking about where this came from, my daughter pointed out that what mom used to do is when she was writing something, when my daughter was writing a story up there and was thinking of names, mom hauled out the Manhattan telephone book and they opened it up and she said, this is a great resource for names in your books. It's thousands of names and they just went through until they found one they liked. So I don't know if that's where Gribley came from or whether there was a family name associated with it, but it's Sam Gribley. And then if you look at it, you can see that the first part is not how it starts in the book. And I'm not sure, Katie, why these are not both, not exactly the way it starts in the book. And these are probably editor's comments. It says begin here in the second paragraph. And I have a feeling her editor for this was Ursula Nordstrom, who was a wonderful very well-known children's book editor for many years. Mom was at Dutton then, which became Penguin, which became Random House Penguin. And those days, when you were accepted by a publishing company, they were really your family and they grew you. I mean, they sent you on trips. They sent her up to Alaska to work on the Julie of the Wolves book. They suggested things. It's very different than it is these days. I'm sure some very high-selling authors get that treatment now, but it's a very different environment. So originally, the book started, it is December the 4th, I think. It may be the 5th, I'm not sure, because there are several days last fall. I forgot to cut notches in the aspen pole. That is my calendar. When I remembered, I couldn't be certain whether 1 or 2 days had passed. Gathering nuts, berries, smoking venison, fish, and small game makes every day seem like every other day. But there's a suggestion here to begin at the next paragraph, which is the way it began in the book. I am on, in which I hole up in a snowstorm. I am on my mountain in a tree home that people have passed without ever knowing I am here. The house is a hemlock tree 6 feet in diameter and must be as old as the mountain itself. I came upon it last summer and dug and burned it out until I made a snug cave in the tree that I now call home. And that's a great beginning, I think. And it makes you want to be in that tree. It makes me want to be in that tree. And so that was an interesting discovery I made. You know, it's interesting for me to come back to this as a grown-up and look at it differently than I did reading it or having my mother read it to me when she was writing it when she was a kid. So she goes on, she starts during the snowstorm. And we find out that she's really looking back at the snowstorm and how she survived it, and looking at the notes that, he survived, and looking at the notes he took. And he writes, everything was white and clean, shining and beautiful. The sky was blue, blue, blue. The hemlock grove was laced with snow. The meadow was smooth and white, and the gorge was sparkling with ice. It was so beautiful and peaceful that I laughed out loud. I guess I laughed because my first snowstorm was over, and it had not been so terrible after all. Then I shouted, I did it. My voice never got very far. It was hushed by tons of snow. And what she's done here too is, so she's telling it from the future, but she brings you back on scene by using the journal, so it's in the present. But she also gives you a little clue that he survived it, you know, that he's okay. So, you know, it's an interesting way to begin. In the old days, when the editors used to say, you can never use flashbacks, just, you know, kids won't understand them, don't do that. Well, she did it pretty well here, and she did it well in Julie of the Wolves. So the other thing that Mom did, which I think I talked about in the first one, is she made kids, she wanted to make kids feel like they were there. I call that on scene. I don't know if that's a technical term for it, but, you know, she wanted you to feel your feet in the mud and your, you know, the pine needles scent in your nose. So this is from her article called Science is Stories. And she said, I want to make each child feel that he is under a hemlock tree with Sam Gribley in my side of the mountain, or on his hands and knees talking to the tundra wolves in Julie of the Wolves. If I do that, I believe that the children will find nature as exciting as I do. And this is just one of the paragraphs from page 24 that I just like, so I put it in here because it kind of made me feel like I was there. I must say this now about that first fire. It was magic. Out of dead tinder and grass and sticks came a live, warm light. It cracked and snapped and smoked and filled the woods with brightness. It lighted the trees and made them warm and friendly. And I just want to get in that tree again and spend the winter there. In which I find many useful plants. You know, I've been racking my brain to find out where the in which came from, that she ended up starting each chapter with. And it was tickling my mind. It was like, was it this book? Was it that book? And I finally thought about Winnie the Pooh. And I looked it up, and there it was. And the Winnie the Pooh chapters all start with in which. So that was a neat connection. So in which I find many useful plants. So not many kids would read about warbler migrations and lists of trees, but in my side of the mountain, in many of Mom's writings, she brings the kids in. So this is just from page 25. The birds were dripping from the trees. This must be a warbler migration. A lot of kids don't even know what a warbler migration is, but they're hanging in there. And then later she says most of the acreage was maple and beech, some pine, dogwoods, and ash. And here and there, glorious hickory. I would have hickory nuts in the fall. And here is a list of trees. And I don't know anyone who would tell a children's book author to bring kids into the novel by listing trees or any kind of list, really. And, but she did. And because they're behind Sam, because Sam needs these to survive, they're sticking with it and they're learning all this. So this is a section where she talks about the puffballs. And I'll explain why this is here later. With pockets and good tough pants, I was willing to pack home many new foods to try. Daisies, the bark of a poplar tree that I saw a squirrel eating, and puffballs. They are mushrooms, the only ones I was really sure enough to eat. And even at that, I kept waiting to die the first night after I ate them. I didn't, so I enjoyed them from that night on. They are wonderful. And on the back of this, you can kind of see it written in between the lines that were bled through. On the back of this is a little note saying, mushrooms are dangerous and I would not suggest you eat them from the forest. The mushroom experts at the botanical gardens told me that. He even said he didn't eat the wild ones. And I can remember her giving me that warning in my childhood. And she said that mushroom expert. And here I learned it was from the botanical gardens. We lived right outside of New York, so it was probably the botanical gardens in the Bronx. But so she is researching and finding ways to include information even as she's writing. And you can see that a lot of this was added. And then we have the issue of him running away. So on page 41, she said, and this is when he's looking for the warden and he has Frightful. And he says, I didn't get back to my tree that night. The May apples were ripe and I stuffed on those as I went through the woods. They taste like very sweet banana or like a very sweet banana and are earthy and a little slippery, but I like them. And so as a kid, I just thought that was great. Now, as a parent, I think, oh my God, if my kid didn't come back one night, well, I would be crazy. But, I think kids like that feeling of freedom. Those nights in summer when you didn't want to go home and you didn't want to come in and you had to go to bed. I think it gives kids the feeling that they're in charge and that it's their life. And I think that's really what she wanted to convey. And so she goes from not going back to his tree at night to a paragraph that she adds a little bit further on, which kind of make you understand his feeling of comfort with the world. And I changed possum to let's see. So I made possum soup in a tin can I found at the bottom of the gorge. I seasoned it with wild garlic and jack-in-the-pulpit. The fire I made was the only of the driest wood, and I made it right at the water's edge. I didn't want a smoky fire this particular evening because of that warden. After supper, I made a bough bed and stretched out with Frightful beside me. Apparently, the more you stroke and handle a falcon, the more readily they train. I had all sorts of plans for Hood's and Jessie's as the strap on the falcon are called, and soon forgot about the man. Stretched out on the boughs, I listened to the wood peewees calling their haunting good nights until I fell sound asleep. So obviously he feels very safe. So this is another thing that she says in the scientist stories. She says, and I think I read this the first time, some of it, biology, or nature as I prefer to call it, is so surprising and inventive that I find it hard to believe that there are children and adults who consider it boring. Yet there are many. And these are just some of the things from the Natural History Museum butterfly collections. Here, this came from a small exhibit we did on fluorescent rocks. That's UV light. This is in regular light. And this is a dandelion with through UV light on this side. This is what we see. This is what the bee sees. I mean, there's so much out there. And she made that, come alive. She was always like talking to scientists. She would say, find the scientists who were also the poets. And she did. She found them. And they had great lifetime relationships. And now I'm going to switch gears a little bit, because when we're talking about giving information through narrative, one of my favorite passages is not from My Side of the Mountain, but it's from Moon of the Salamander. She did a whole series, 13 books based on the moons of the year. And each moon was a different animal, the deer, the bears. But I read this to my kids in the library one time. I'll tell you a little story about that. So this is the Moon of the Salamanders, one of my favorites. The first spring thaw was followed by the first spring rain. Water poured from the clouds. The cold ponds filled to their brims and set a dark stage for the ancient ritual of the mole salamanders. One of these actors awoke under the soil in a woodland in Michigan. Like all mole salamanders, he was a creature of the darkness. He lifted his head and heard the thaw. It purled. He listened to the rain. It tapped. He listened. He did not listen with ears on the outside of his head, for he had none, but with primitive ears that lay inside the head and along the body and tail, much like the hearing organs of fish. These body ears pick up the subtle sounds in the water and the earth. He heard the tapping of the rain. It grew heavier. The spotted salamander pushed up on his short, soft legs and stepped forward. He was almost as big. He was big, almost 9 inches long, and between 5 and 25 years old. Not only did he look like his early ancestors, he behaved like them. He ate insects and worms and lived in the earth and darkness as they did. Like them, he returned to the water once a year on the night of the first spring rain after the first spring thaw. This was his night to go. Woo-hoo! And so I had read this to a group of first graders in my library, and we were comparing like ID books and narrative books about we picked the salamander. And I read, we read the ID book, and then we read this, and this little girl, Lucia, raised her hands, and I said, yeah. And she says, well, in the ID book, I learned how big the salamander is, where it lives, what it eats. She said, but when you read your mom's book, I knew how it felt to be a salamander. And I thought, well, that's all you need to do. And I wish Mom had heard that, because I think that's exactly what she would hope for. And this thing is loaded. I mean, it talks about the cold ponds, the vernal ponds, filling, and these they're under the soil. The first thaw after the first, and the first spring rain after the first thaw, the primitive ears that lay inside the head and along the body and tail. Now, what kid wouldn't love that? And that's the kind of stuff she just loved, the details. She'd always find out more information, and she just worked these in, and kids ended up studying salamanders. And the fact that he was 25 years old and that he behaved like his ancient ancestors, and he ate insects and worms, and that tonight was his night to go. That's just so great. So That was one of my favorites. So I'm going to sum this up, and I'm hoping that people have questions and things. I have a couple of things if you don't, but I'm hoping you do. So, the other thing is, somebody mentioned Walden and Thoreau, and he was pretty outspoken about his point of view on the what he could change and how we could change. But Sam was more into like surviving. He just wanted to find the thing to eat and get his house in order. But then in this paragraph, sometimes you feel like, you only can make a small difference. And even if you're just, one person at a time. And I found this, and it kind of caught me in this time that we're living in. Who's making that noise? I said sleepily to Frightful. She ruffled her feathers. I listened. Pop, pip. I rolled over and stuck my face in the grass. Something gleamed beneath me, and in the fading light, I could see an earthworm coming out of its hole. Nearby, another one arose, and there was a pop. Little bubbles of air snapped, and these voiceless animals of the earth came to the surface. That got me to smiling. I was glad to know this about earthworms. I don't know why this seemed like one of the nicest things I had learned in the woods, that earthworms, lowly, confined to the darkness of the earth, could make just a little stir in the world. And that's what we all want to do, right? We all want to make our little stir in the world for good. And I'll finish on that, but I'm hoping, here's some questions. Maybe somebody will pipe up, and if you don't, I have one more thing we could do. So, how did you feel about the ending of My Side of the Mountain? Do you have any desire to do what Sam did? One of the few tips my mother gave me about writing for kids is to get rid of the parents and buy the second chapter. Is that good advice? Many people over the years have mentioned that Sam and My Side of the Mountains made a difference in their lives. Did you feel that way? You want to share it? My mother wove a lot of information into her writing with what I call science words. Did any stand out for you? And are there any favorite passages or observations that you want to share? So I'm so hoping maybe there'll be a few. If not, we'll figure something out.
All right, Twig, thank you. Let's unshare, and you've given us a lot of good questions and prompts to think about. Before we get started, I'll share my screen again just to get us started, because Marion sent in a picture of something that she did from My Side of the Mountain, kind of follow on from last week. And I'll show that, and then Marion can let us know. Oh.
Ooh.
Okay, Mary, do you want to come on, unshare and tell us about this?
These beautiful pictures.
Yes, thank you. I don't remember if Sam had sassafras tea or not, but my husband found some across the road from our house, along with the staghorn sumac, but I don't think they're ready yet to make lemonade. So I did make some tea, and I'm drinking it now. I boiled the little roots you see in the picture there for about 15 minutes until it got a dark red color. I put some honey in it, and it does taste slightly of root beer, but it also reminds me of mushrooms. I don't know why. So
Good
that's what I did.
Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah.
And I never read this book when my daughter did. And she's also on here too. I don't know if you noticed the last names are the same. Sarah Havdi.
I have to see. I can only see a few names at a time with the way I have it set up. But hi, Sarah.
Marion, Marion, this is Bronwyn. Can you let us know how did you learn how to make the sassafras tea and the sumac lemonade? Who taught you that?
These books right here, Yule Gibbons
There you, oh, yeah.
and Forest and Thicket. Both of them had sassafras tea.
Yeah, we used to make it. I can't remember if Sam did have sassafras tea. would
I know
imagine.
he had a drink. He had some tea in his tree, but I
Yeah,
can't remember what it was.
something else, but it's
Yeah.
very good. It's very tasty. If you want to try it, it's one of the ones that will keep you.
I'll have, yeah, so do a quick search and see if he had sassafras tea. I don't remember that either. Twig, before we open it up for people, if you want to raise your hand, you want to put something in the chat box, and I'll call on you. But for those of you who might not be familiar, that this is the first in a trilogy of stories, is that correct?
Yes.
So that Sam continues on. Could you give us a little bit information about what the other two books in the series kind of cover?
Well, I think I mentioned it in the first session, but you know, Mom actually wanted to make Sam a female, a girl, and she was having a hard enough time convincing the publishers, you know, to let her write a book about a kid who runs away and lives in the woods. So unfortunately, at the time that, you know, the fact that he was a boy prevailed, and she had a great, really wonderful cousin named Sam, and they did a lot of things together when they were young and made up a language. And so she named him Sam, and then we'll figure out where he got Gribley from. I don't know, maybe the New York phone book. But so the second one she was thinking of, and I don't think it was like until the 90s. It was a long time after. And she was wondering sort of how to figure it out. And I said, you know, he had a sister named Alice, and they had all moved up there, and maybe they all moved up at Alice Stays, you know. And she thought, oh yeah. And so she made, I love Alice. If you've read the second one, Alice is great. She has all kinds of inventions, and she has a pig, and it's a wonderful story, a little different than the first one. And then it goes on to finally, she finishes up with Frightful's story, and after he was freed and how he survived on his own. And that's the third book, is Frightful's Mountain. I don't know what it's called. Something,
Yeah.
Frightful something. You know, it's terrible, but if you're the kid of a writer who writes a lot of books, that you tend to like, you know, just come up with code words for the different words for the different books. Like my side of the mountain is just my side, or MSTOTM, or MSOTM, or the Frightful, or the others. You know, it's so it's hard to remember the real names sometimes. So.
But and is that something that happens? I mean, the falcons are let free after a certain amount of time, or
I think did she let him free? Well, somebody tried to steal him.
oh,
That's all I'll say. And by then we had gotten to a time when it was really illegal to keep falcons, unless you had a permit. And so he had to work that out, and you could see how he worked it out in the book.
all right. Justine wrote, a copy of Jean's acorn pancakes, dandelion salad, and 33 other wild recipes. Yeah, we talked about that book last week. I think somebody made a recipe.
Yeah,
shared that. So that was great.
Recipe.
All right. So does anybody want to share a reflection of the book? You can go off of any of the questions that Twig proposed, or is there a favorite part or something that you'd like to share that what the book meant to you? You can raise your hand, and I'll call on you to chat with us. Who wants to say something? Raise your hand.
And I never wanted to say anything either. Well, I'll tell
That's
you.
okay.
over the years, we have gotten so many, my mother got thousands of letters, and we are still getting many, many letters from people who are writing her. Some know she's gone, some don't. Some kids are writing directly to her. And she touched the lives of a lot of people. A lot of people wrote and said, before I read this, I wanted to, I lived on Long Island and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And now I'm a scientist and I live in Washington State or Montana somewhere. And that was a very common letter. It was a very common experience. And many of the falconers got going because of my side of the mountain. They read about it and then they went on to find out more about my uncles and their work with falcons. And it's incredible. And even some kids who had very tough lives during a period. I know one who I guess her parents were having a lot of trouble, and she was, and we're in a tough place, and she kept my side of the mountain right at her bedside for years and years and years. She said because it made her feel strong and that she could survive and she could make her way. So there were a lot of interest, a lot of reactions to my side of the mountain that I don't know if Mom expected when she wrote it, but I think it was her dream to live free and unfettered and probably in the woods. And she wanted to pass that possibility. Maybe you didn't do it, but maybe, as she said in the introduction, to run away in a book is a wonderful thing. So, she wanted to give that to kids too.
One of my things was I like the fact that Sam didn't get the fire started the first time, and if things didn't work out all like he wanted to all the time. So failure was okay, and it didn't stop him. And if he didn't know something, he went and learned something more to get to the next spot. And then he relied on people to help him. And there was also a bit of luck, but he also was very prepared. I was as well, because he must have done a lot of reading in the library before, because he knew a lot of things before he got out there.
I think she mentions at the beginning that his father had taught him a lot, and you have to know a lot. And we did get 2 letters one time. One from John, who said, "My name is John. I was about to run away. My mom caught me at the front door. She said I had to write you and find out what I really need to know to go live in the mountains by myself." And she said, "Oh, P.S. my friend Paul was going to come with me. You'll probably get a letter from him too." 2 days later, we get the letter. "Hi, my name is Paul. My mother told me I had to write you and find out." And usually if kids ask that, she'd say, go join Outward Bound or some of the programs in your area to really learn, because it is hard. You need to know a lot. Like the mushroom specialist said, you got to know what you're doing before you start eating everything out there. And also Nick Spiro says that you can get overwhelmed by it, and you can just go one plant by one plant, but you're learning one plant by one plant. It's a way to start. But yes, and the kids in Wichita that I had some pictures of in the second session that did all the activities. A lot of them, they couldn't start a fire. They didn't catch a fish. The shelter fell down, but they still had a great day. And they weren't, critical of themselves. They knew that they would, they could try again. And most of them said it was one of the best days they had. And I think I said, in the second one, in the second Zoom, when I went out there to visit them, I met a young lady who was a barista in a coffee shop. And when she asked me, where I came from and what I was doing in Strong City, I said, "I'm going to the school. I'm going to be meeting Rachel Matai in her class that does the Sam Gribley Day." And she looked up and she said, I was the first class. I was the first class of Sam Gribley Day. And it was the best day of my life. So, you know, these things are deep and wonderful. And, you know, you can get tired of certain toys and certain games and stuff. But if you get interested in plants or trees or water plants or wetlands, you can learn about it for the rest of your life, and you still aren't going to learn everything. Fossils are fabulous. We have a great fossil person at the museum, and it goes on and on and on. And I think kids, you know, once they are introduced to it, they love it. But some of them these days don't get introduced to it. You know, they don't have that time outside, and they don't have that time with people who know it and love it. So give them my side of the mountain, take them out.
Well, there was also good that, I mean, the boy taught adults, so Sam taught adults and adults taught Sam, so there was information transfer going both ways,
Right.
and it was an equal. And then nature was teaching everybody. Let's see, we had Jan said that I shared this with a group, a Zoom art class that she was attending, a book club, and how much I was enjoying it. One of the women who lives in Louisiana was so excited and said she had loved the whole trilogy and was now going to go reread them all again. So there you go.
Oh, and here's a comment. I remember, this is my brother Neil. Dad saying that Jean got the idea of a hollowed out tree from the hikes in Allen Seeger Park, where there was up near Penn State, and there was a grove of, and still is an old grove of old growth hemlocks, and that apparently, I think it's where they spent their honeymoon too, but apparently there's a lot of big old hemlocks up there. And I think
so is the hemlock your mom's favorite tree because it plays a role in a lot of things?
The hemlock?
Yeah, was it her favorite tree?
She loved hemlock, she did, and she was so sad that now they're being, you know, attacked by disease, and it's becoming harder to find them. She had them all around the back of her house, but they weren't big, they were little trees.
All right, what's another question that you had on and the power that you were gonna share or prompt? Oh, Rebecca Henson has her hand up. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Hi, let me lower my hand. One sec. I just wanted to say our two sons, they're 9 and 12, read this with my husband, the trilogy, and just, you know, how it resonated with them. They both already loved Peregrine Falcons. So it was really neat to almost find, you know, a home in a book that, wow, you know, there's someone else who had, I mean, they didn't go on the adventure that Sam did, but it was just neat to see them so excited by it. And my husband too just couldn't wait to read it to them. So it was a nice experience. But I also wanted to say that my day job is researching Rachel Carson and creating a museum for her here in Silver Spring, Maryland. And so much of what I think your mom embodied and how she was able to communicate that wonder in nature. I mean, that's a real success. And that's something I was just up with Carson's papers this past week at Yale. And her dream was to write her next book would be a full-length book, a chapter book on the connections of children in the natural world, but in an intergenerational way. And when she died, they did publish this, you know, Small Sense of Wonder, which was really an article from the 50s, but she had wanted something much more expansive and to really dig in because she thought that's where, you know, the power really lay was with the children. So I'm just grateful that you're doing this program, and it's nice to meet you.
Oh, it's nice to hear that story. Actually, my father worked across the hall from her at the Tucson for a little bit. And he also did some early work on DDT that he might have given her, you know, as part of her study. She did a lot. I would, you know, I would say he's influential, but yeah, you know, she was I think that same, well, is it the same? I don't know, but that understanding of nature to the point where it does become poetry, where you can make it available, is something that they both aspired to, and I would love to have seen that book. Did she have any notes on it? Do they know? Or you're
Yes, I was able to find the table of contents, which I hadn't seen before, and some sketches of, you know, different the different chapters. But it also, your mom also, I just wanted to mention, reminded me of some of Carson's work in Baltimore for the Baltimore Sun, because she covered the Chesapeake Bay as her beat for the Sun, and her goal was to take readers kind of, you know, into the eyes or behind the eyes of an eel or a shad or the various creatures. And that would be the whole feature of these articles. And it really was to, you know, it expanded, I think, you know, their sense of place and around, you know, the Chesapeake, but also their sense of empathy.
Yeah, and I think, you probably know the details of this story, but I think that Rachel Carson was in her early days working for one of the agencies, Fish and Wildlife, and was asked to write a report or a study up, and she wrote it in, you know, in prose, which she did so beautifully. And the head of the department, or wherever she gave it to, instead of sort of criticizing her for not making it a scientific report, you know, he said, this is a gift, you know, we should go that way. And, you know, we should all have somebody like that in our lives, instead of, you know, making her try to fit into this narrower place. You know, he saw the value and encouraged her, which, you know, doesn't always happen in life. I'm glad it did for her.
Yeah, and she even credits him, Elmer Higgins at Fish and
Was
Wildlife
that
Service,
it?
because you know, she would trace her career back to that moment of where he said, well, this won't work for Fish and Wildlife Service, but it would be great in the Atlantic Monthly. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great point about encouragement.
Yeah. Well, mom's moment was when she, in third grade, she went up to do a math problem and wrote it on the board. You know, they had to go up and write it on the board, and she didn't know anything about it, didn't know what it was. But so she went out and she wrote a poem, and the teacher, her teacher then, instead of, again, criticizing her, said, Jean, that's a beautiful poem, but, you know, it's not the math problem, but, you know, it's a beautiful poem and you should continue writing them. So it was that same moment where you were supposed to go this way, and somebody said, no, this is your way. So that's neat.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Rebecca.
Yeah. Are you're in Silver Spring?
Yes, I'm in the neighborhood where Rachel lived when she won the National Book Award for Under the Sea Wind. And so the museum itself will be in between the two neighborhoods where she lived the longest, and right next to our Trader Joe's. So it's very accessible. Yeah.
Oh, that's it.
Well, I had well, wait, don't be shy. You can raise your hand or put something in the chat box. I also thought it was amazing if it came out in the 50s. I can't even watch movies anymore from the 1980s that I grew up with because they don't age well. And sometimes I have to tell, if I'm getting ready to watch something from the early 80s or the 70s, it's because of cultural changes and norms and things that are not accepted. I have to preface everything to my kids and say, this was the 1970s, things were different. This was the 80s, this is humor in the 80s, different. And a lot of times you'll see on a review for a movie or something. It didn't age well. It didn't age well. But you're reading My Side of the Mountain, and there's nothing in there that would be considered controversial today versus
Right
that.
away.
But there's nothing that you have to, that didn't age well. It just is, because I think that there's a constant amongst us that we're all seeking to be closer to nature and understand plants and animals and have that same dream that your mom did is still alive in all of us today. And we share that bit of that dream that she shared that dream from all the people who came before her of being out and living in the wild on your own. So it doesn't age at all, and it definitely didn't. It just is. It's a constant. That was something from me.
It does seem.
I can't watch some things. I'm like, oh my God, it's so cringy to even watch it now. That the way that we, the humor is something that they did. So
Yeah, the comments and the technology. You look at that technology and think, oh no, we have changed.
Malachi wrote that they're going to the falconry day at the Craighead House and super excited.
Yes. If you're interested in falcons, or you have a child who's interested in falcons, they're going to have a falconry day with a woman who's a falconer up at the Craighead House in October. And you can go to craigheadhouse.org and get the schedule. She's fabulous, and she flies the birds, and it's really great. Nothing.
All right, we got some more. It says, Sarah says it holds up well, but it reads differently as a 30-something than as an 8-year-old. So that's true.
Yeah. Well, I find looking at it as an adult whose mother wrote it, and when I was a kid, when I was in 3rd grade, yeah, it's very different. But it was interesting. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how she planned it, and things that I wouldn't have noticed when I was a kid. That what she put into it, how she did it. And we were just kids running in and out of the house. As she was typing over here in the sunroom, she had a desk where she could kind of keep an eye on all of us. And in the spring, people gave us all the orphan birds and the birds that fell out of nests, and it was in the 60s, and there were a lot of birds that were sick from pesticides and things. But there were, when they were first little tiny ones, we had a 8-foot table in the dining room, and there were baby birds and all these mismatched teacups, and we'd all run in and feed them. And my brothers would come in the other door, feed them. And some of them, they survived, and we just, loved having them. But in the midst of all that, my mother could sit down and write one chapter, and then another chapter, and then another chapter. It was pretty amazing. Now, looking back on it, then I didn't think any of it.
Jan, do you have a?
Yeah, I'm also, I'm a retired librarian from the Pratt Library, and
Oh, great.
and I did not read this until I got to be a Pratt librarian, and it was on, it still is on, middle school reading lists, and I absolutely loved it. And that was a long time ago. I mean, I was in my 20s, I think, when I read it. I just was enthralled by it. So I didn't read it, and until I was,
When you were young.
yeah, I didn't read it as a little kid, and I wish that I wish I'd given it to my dad to read. He also would have absolutely loved it. But this class has just, it's so wonderful. And I've shared with 2 groups of people, about this book club, and I mean, this woman from Louisiana is wonderful, and she just said, "Oh, I loved that book. I loved all of her books, and I'm going to go read them all again." And it was so people. I mean, she had a profound, she had a profound effect, and still does. And I also love that book, A Sense of Wonder by Rachel Carson. I think that's a great book. I want to know more about, and I might have just not, I missed a spring song. Rebecca, it's a museum, because I live in Tacoma Park. So
Oh, wonderful. I'll put our website in the chat, because we're a community organization and, you know, small but mighty, and 501c3 status for 4 years, and got approval from Montgomery Parks to develop the Burnt Mills East property near Trader Joe's, and you know, in honor of Carson's, really her teachings, because that's what she would have wanted, her writings and her messages. But just like Twig's mom, it just feels like there's so much wonder and truth that has been in these amazing books that are out there, and I can't bear to think of future generations not having access to that, or not having, being able to really delve into these writers. And we're just lucky to have these women to celebrate and celebrate their teachings.
Yeah.
Certainly they both had a big effect on my life. And I bought the cookbook just arrived a couple of days ago. So we were looking at it last night about what we would like to make. So it's great. So thank you so much for this.
And I don't know. I know Rachel Carson got some criticism for popularizing information, and Mom took quite a lot of criticism for popularizing, scientific information, and even from her brothers who were scientists. And it wasn't until they got much older that they realized that she reached a lot of people with her work, and they finally gave her tip of the hat.
All over the country.
Yeah.
All over the country, not just here.
Yeah, all over the world. I think at one point they were published in 22, some of her books, 22 languages around the world.
Thank you for doing this. It's great.
It's not too late. It's not too late, Scout. We have to ask any question that you want. If you have Twig, this is a great opportunity to get information. Scout asks, what was Jean's emotional life like?
Her emotional life. That's a good question. She was a strong person, a very strong person. And sometimes that caused conflict. She wasn't afraid of conflict. She wasn't afraid of much, I'll tell you. Even as she was getting, she was, 80, 85, she had a stroke. She was, it was very hard for her to come back from that. And she looked at me one day, because I was trying to get people to take care of her all the time and make sure she didn't fall. And she just looked at me and she said, "Twig, I'm not afraid." And I was like, wow, okay. And she wasn't. And, but she, like, our relationship, I think, was very close and very difficult at times, because she was driven in her direction, and it was hard for me to carve out a place of my own. And so, she was very in tune with people when they needed something from her. A friend of my brother's went through a very bad time and was, he sort of had, closed himself off in a cabin and wasn't speaking to people and was having a lot of trouble, very depressed. and hadn't seen anybody, even in his family, for at least a year. And Mom just called him up and said, Eric, he said, we're going out to lunch next Tuesday. I'll meet you at so-and-so. And he said, here he was, he had been, depressed, not talking.
Oops, something happened to Twig.
I'll try to retrieve her.
Okay.
Hey, Twig?
I don't think they know that, that she fell off the line. We can't end like this. She's got to come on in.
Anyway, so he said he had, he was in this terrible depression. He hadn't seen anybody in a year. But Jean George called him, and he had to show up, and that was the beginning of his coming back. So she could give a lot. She could give a lot to people, and she did. I don't know if that answers that question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Are any of you writers or have parents who are writers? I know we have one librarian. We had. Nope. Some of you are related to writers. It's an interesting, it's my daughter.
Did your mom help you when you were writing your books?
Well, that's another interesting thing. So Mom was a writer. She was not an editor. She was not a teacher of writing. So she wrote, and if I gave, even growing up, like during high school and middle school, if I would ask her questions about one of my projects or something, she would like get it right in there and do it. And a couple of times I didn't take it to school because I really felt like she did it. And I felt bad about that. And somebody said, well, I want Jean Craighead George to do my homework. It was like, well, that's probably true. But when you're a daughter, you don't want her to do your homework. So, when I was began writing, I would give her a manuscript, but she'd start just look like the manuscript I showed you. She'd start writing in things. I was like, no, Mom, just talk me through it. Don't rewrite it. So, except for telling me to get rid of the adults in the second chapter, I had to be a little careful, and I would ask her things I wouldn't show her. So I don't know whether that's true in every writer's case or not. I have friends who are writers that work very well with other people.
Well, she seemed to take advice from her editors, and
yeah, sometimes. But there were other times when I'd come in and I'd see her. A lot of the editors wrote in pencil, and they'd write comments on the side. And I'd come up and I'd see her, and she'd be erasing a comment. I said, Mom, what are you doing? She goes, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And which was sometimes true, because a lot of it had to do with science. And, sometimes the questions were a little odd that the person would ask, but she would just erase it. But she got to the point where she could do that. Not every writer can do that to their editor.
we
Right,
have some
Barbara?
we have some aspiring writers on the line. Any advice that your mom would give to aspiring writers, or any advice that you could give to aspiring writers?
Well, I think if you were on for which one was it? The one I shared, the Science is Stories article that she wrote, really to find your subject, to follow the thread, to get information and to dive in there. And she said she would write one draft and kind of etch it out. And then she would go back, and she often said to me, she would then find the poetry and add the details and, you know, make the kind of, she didn't write outlines. She wrote a sort of a quick story that she could then go back and feed. But it's, you know, so much of her books also reflected her childhood and things that she did, you know, and that she knew. And, you know, living in a tent in the, you know, in Michigan, and for 4 years, and the physical and sensual experience of that often came through in her writing. Her youth, and then her travels. She traveled a lot and got a real sense. So she would always say, you have to go and see the creature that you're writing about in their natural environment. And so I started to write a book about a shark, and I did all the research at the aquarium. I watched sharks, I read articles, I talked to scientists, and I wanted to write a good shark book. So I started writing, and it was like, I'd start off with 2 kids, and they were on the boat, and then they'd jump off the boat and they'd be snorkeling around, and then there would be a shark coming, and it would be like dump, 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 dump. And pretty soon, you know, it was like the second chapter, boom, the shark would eat the kids, and the story was over. I was like, I did that 3 times. And it was like, what is wrong? And so finally I realized, you know, I still had this basic fear of sharks. So I contacted a scientist, went down to Bimini, swam with the sharks. I was so afraid the first time I jumped in that my kneecaps were going up and down like this. But then I got in the water, and they were so, you know, they're very solemn. They're solemn. It was quiet. There was no dump, 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 dump music playing. And it completely changed my feelings and about them. And I came home and I could write the book. So, you know, go on a trip.
Write what you know, and if you
Right.
don't know it, go find out in
Yeah.
the real world, IRL, in
Jump
real
in.
life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, jump in, go see it, so you have, you know, people know that you're writing. It's an authentic voice as
Yeah.
well. I think that's great advice for us all. We all need to go out and spend some more time in real life with nature, and let it be our teacher, and hopefully it'll inspire us in a variety of ways, from recipes to art to whatever. And Jan's going to be reading Crowbar next, so we do have
true story.
we do have,
mm-hmm.
yeah, we do have quite a few books from Jean's repertoire that are available for purchase. They're no longer in print, so one of the only places that you can get them is at the Natural History Society of Maryland. So keep that in mind. We will be having, again, meeting back up on September 7th to watch the movie together. We'll also be having Museum Store Sunday, fingers crossed, on the Sunday after Thanksgiving. It's a great time to come in and buy so many books. It's our big book sale, as well as a lot of other things. So you can grab 1, 2, or a whole series of Jean's books and read them yourself, then gift them to others. And if anybody else doesn't have any other questions for Twig, I'm going to call the end of the Sam Gribley fan club to an end, and we'll reconvene on September 7th at the museum to watch the movie. Hope to see you in person there, and if not, see you out in nature somewhere where paths will cross.
Yes.
And thank you, Twig. Thank you, Twig, so much.
Well,
for
thank
sharing.
you guys. Thank you all for joining in here, and you know, you've been wonderful. Thank you. I wish I could see you in person.
Well, you might see them at the
Maybe
movie.
we'll come to the movie. Yeah.
Come to the movie, and we can criticize the movie for not following the book better. Yeah. We can.
Yeah, there's some things you see that are not quite right, but you know.
Right. Well, maybe we'll all have to get together and redo the book. Redo the movie, not the book. We'll
Well, I've tried to get them to redo it, but I've never been successful, so.
Well, we'll have to do
maybe
it surreptitiously. All right.
Okay.
Bye, everybody. Stay well.
Thank you,
Stay
everybody.
outside. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Keep reading.
you.
Keep reading.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye. See you soon.